America's Heartland is made possible by Farm Credit, financing agriculture and rural America since 1916. Farm Credit is cooperatively owned by America's farmers and ranchers. Learn more at farmcredit.com. Crop Life America, representing the companies whose modern farming innovations help America's farmers provide nutritious food for communities around the globe.
Hi, I'm Rob Stewart. Looking for something different on your dinner table? Well, stick around because we'll take you cross-country to meet some farmers bringing in unusual crops. Small and crunchy, sesame seeds have been a valuable crop for thousands of years. You've had them in candy and on hamburger buns. But one farmer in Oklahoma is changing the way the crop gets to consumers. Forget about corn or wheat tortillas. Researchers in North Dakota want you to try tortillas made from beans. Want to dress your salad with olive oil that comes from a higher source? How about oil associated with divine intervention? And bringing in a harvest of sea salt headed for your dinner table. It's all coming up on America's Heartland.
You can see it in the eyes of every woman and man in America's heartland, living close to the land. There's a love for the country and a pride in the brand in America's heartland, living close to the land.
We brought you lots of stories about the farm and ranch families who deliver the food, fuel, and fiber so important to consumers in the U.S. and around the world. And the numbers are impressive when you total them up. American farmers lead the world in corn production and have a lion's share in raising soybeans used in hundreds of products. U.S. wheat goes to markets around the globe. American rice producers deliver the white grains to markets in Asia, as well as its growing popularity in the U.S. And let's not forget other crops like cotton, oats, and sorghum, even maple syrup. So, overseas markets are important. Consumers just like you are ready to try new foods, and researchers are finding new uses for old favorites. And what about those specialty crops? Well, let's start in Oklahoma, where Akiba Howard says a very ancient grain has a very bright future.
Open sesame was the magical phrase unlocking the treasures of an ancient cave.
Yeah, this is a healthy looking sesame plant.
Today, opening a sesame pod unlocks a culinary treasure.
We're able to grow this here because it loves the hot weather, doesn't need much moisture, and so that really fits into where we are today.
Jimmy Kinder is a third-generation wheat farmer in Walters, Oklahoma. He'd been looking for a drought-resistant, economically viable crop to rotate with his winter wheat. Sesame fit the bill.
This is one of the unique things about this crop is that we're not looking for a market. We have a market for sesame. We just haven't been able to grow it efficiently until now.
That demand, along with new seed varieties and new technology, provided a crop opportunity for farmers. And there's another benefit.
The harvesting equipment is the same as with wheat, as with corn, that's the neat thing about sesame. There's no specialized piece of equipment needed.
So why hasn't the crop been more widely grown? Well, another word on open sesame. The pods open when ripe and spill their seeds onto the ground. The challenge has been to develop a pod that holds the seeds until the entire field is ready for a machine harvest. New plant varieties have made that possible.
And so the variety that we have actually stays closed until we can come in and get a harvester to actually roll the pod open and release the seed.
What you're looking at is a unique sesame pod that exists nowhere else in the world, non-dehiscent sesame, which means non-shattering sesame. The rest of the world today is still hand-harvested sesame.
Danny Pieper is an agronomist with Sesico, a company looking to expand sesame production in the U.S.
Explain a little bit about how the sesame seed plant grows.
Okay, well, what we have here is basically a little bit varying stages of maturity. Basically, the flowers come out and they last one day, and it can put on 2 to 4, maybe even 6 flowers a day in the peak of bloom. And those flowers last one day, fall off in the evening, and they're replaced by a small capsule full of seed.
From crop to consumer, Jimmy Kinder's sesame seeds make their way through processing to be cleaned and sorted.
Show me what's going on here.
Well, basically from the bulk storage bin, you know, we bring the seed in through these conveyors.
Oh, okay.
And it's, you know, similar to the seed you would see on a hamburger bun.
Right.
And this is the first stage in the cleaning process, getting it from the bin to the cleaner.
This Heartland crop will be packaged and shipped around the world. Half the global supply is made into oil. The whole seeds are used for baking, candy, and ethnic dishes, a market that continues to grow.
It's a very strong market. You know, we're nowhere close to meeting the demand for it. There's not enough sesame grown in the world to meet current demand, current consumption levels. So there's a huge amount of growth that can happen.
Here's a story on the sesame and the bean.
Jimmy Kinder's been sharing his sesame story with others in a blog that talks about agricultural advances and a crop dating back thousands of years.
It's no doubt that technology can be a great thing, but farming's still an art. And then I've been able to take that human side that's been handed down from father to son over years, then actually multiply that with technology. And then we see a great benefit from those two banks of knowledge coming together.
Some historians claim that sesame seeds were the first plant to be used in creating oils for cooking, and the ancient Babylonians even used sesame seeds to make cosmetic creams and lotions.
There's no doubt that new food products impact what we eat and what we demand from producers. Farmers and ranchers respond to those consumer demands and adjust their production accordingly. Think about it. Things like rice cakes, microwave popcorn, barbecued chicken pizza, even Diet Colas were once new products on the supermarket shelf. So what's on the horizon? Well, Sarah Gardner says farmers and researchers in North Dakota have a few ideas from something called pulse crops.
Food scientists at this North Dakota laboratory are testing recipes using flour made from pulse crops. More than 60 grain legumes make up the pulse crop family, including well-known staples like beans, lentils, and chickpeas.
And those are crops that are gaining a lot of interest in the food world today from the standpoint that they have a great balance of fiber, protein, and carbohydrates, a very good blend.
Most of the breads and pastries we consume are made from wheat. The work here aims to develop other flour sources, not only as an additional crop option for farmers, but also because some people have trouble digesting the gluten proteins that give wheat flour its consistency.
I think it rolls really well, but something about the amount of water, and maybe I should play more with the ratio of the dry peas.
Okay, yeah, it looks like you're getting some cracking.
Yeah, so I think it got dried. We incorporated roasted dry pea flour inside the wheat tortillas, and that is to enhance the nutritional value of the tortilla products. Normally wheat tortilla only have the wheat flour, water, shortening, some salt and baking powder. But by adding this, it will significantly enhance the protein content, also fiber.
North Dakota leads the nation in the production of the beans, peas, and legumes that make up the pulse crop category. North Dakota State University even holds a Pulse Seed Day to provide crop information to farmers.
I very much appreciate those of you who have come out to spend time with us this morning to talk about our pulse crop research effort here at the Carrington Center.
Pulse seed crops are useful in crop rotation because they not only return a good deal of nitrogen to the soil, they also provide breaks in the disease cycles that can affect other grain crops, as well as oilseed crops like soybeans.
When you say you hope the farmers take away information that they can put into effect this season, give me some examples of what you might want to see.
One of the major research focuses that we have here is to manage plant pests, in particular plant diseases, in the pulse crops, both in terms of improving yield and, very importantly, improving the quality of that crop.
That is solid.
Farmers here also want to know more about consumer markets for new products developed from pulse crops.
Some of the new sectors of the marketplace that are being opened up would be the convenience foods, the foods that are more readily prepared. That would include not only ready-made meals, but also the snack items.
New consumer products are only one area of opportunity. Livestock feed is another.
And we found that the quality of the meat that resulted from beef that were fed peas was improved. It was more tender, and it also tasted better.
So someday we can look forward to seeing a sign at the beef counter saying pea-fed beef?
Exactly. Actually, that terminology, pea-fed beef, is something that I believe is a label, is a reference that we are fostering and working in conjunction with the Northern Pulse growers on, yes.
And we grow about 3,000 acres of pulse crops. And pulse crops would be lentils, chickpeas, or soybeans, or peas.
13, all right. Well,
Farmer Kevin Haas began growing legumes some 20 years ago. They now make up 50% of his crops.
A pulse crop actually is able to fix its own nitrogen from the air. And so in that sense, you don't have to put any additional fertilizer on. And that's always good economically and probably good for the environment as well.
The ongoing food project at the Northern Crops Institute may provide insights on incorporating pulse crops into foods more accessible to consumers. Options that would benefit shoppers, as well as those looking to expand the crop choices in their fields.
They're developing uses now as making them to a flour and different things like that. So they're readily available. You put them in as an ingredient to your food and cook them, and you get the health benefit, and you can do it quite quickly.
All right, let's talk legumes. Along with grains, beans were among the first crops cultivated by early societies. Ancient Egyptians considered beans to be an emblem of life and had temples dedicated to them. Since beans stored well and traveled well, they were a mainstay on long sea voyages in colonial times, which is where navy beans got their name.
No matter what your diet, we know you're consuming more olive oil these days. The health benefits of olive oil have prompted the food folks to use more olive oil in salad dressings and baked goods, even desserts. Well, that's good news for growers, and it's also good news for a group of California nuns with some very special olive trees.
Look way up there.
Yeah.
Way at the top. Bunch up here.
Excitement fills the air for the Dominican Sisters of Mission San Jose.
But see this one too.
It's that time of year again when their olive trees are loaded. Cluster after cluster hangs everywhere in these historic olive trees with roots dating back to the late 1700s. And they're still growing right here on the original mission land where Spaniards settled in Fremont.
Well, olives were something native to Spain. It would be something that would have been part of their diet. So little by little, agriculture became a big thing here.
So Dolores, this is the oldest remaining building
of the original adobe buildings that were part of the mission complex.
Wow. This dates back to?
This one was probably built about 1810 after the church was finished.
Just like most of the original buildings, the mission crops have crumbled, except for these thriving olive trees. This is the oldest standing mission olive orchard in the state, covering the land that remained after most of the mission property was sold to ranchers in 1830.
We got back 28 1/3 acres of our land, some of which now we have sold off as well.
To
the Dominican Sisters of Mission San Jose, who are our neighbors behind us here.
Behind the mission, rows and rows of olive trees, leading up to the Dominicans' mother house, sort of a divine intervention, introducing the next generation of caretakers for the crop. For decades, the Dominican sisters would harvest the fruit and press their very own olive oil by hand for sacrament celebrations and convent cooking. But in 1964, that harvest ended when the sisters could no longer handle the harsh labor of picking and pressing.
So you used to pick these trees right out here?
But I remember more trees being here. And more, you know, not so high, because I think they have grown.
They were lower.
They were lower, so I could hide.
Sister Florence Cumberlich was one of the sisters that used to pick the olives decades ago, back when all of this grass was covered with the trees she loves.
They are gorgeous. I mean, when you look at them and you see the silvery tops on them, you know, and the wind breeze going through them.
For years, it was just falling on the ground. They were walking all over, splashing all over our habits, and it was going to waste, and that was really almost sinful.
But that sin on the ground became a gift from on high for Sister Karen Elizabeth Zavitz and the rest of the Dominican sisters. A saint of the soil stepped forward when professional olive oil maker Dan Shabika offered up the services of his company to pick and press the olives for the sisters for free.
I think staying connected to the spiritual significance of the olive tree and also the temporal significance of the olive tree in California is rooted right here.
He has such a passion. He has a passion for the olive trees and the olive oil and, you know, its many properties, from the sacred to the secular. And he's really instilled that in us.
Well, I think you're going to have a good crop this year, and of course the olive oil will be impeccable.
I think that we have a lot better harvest coming up.
Your eye is getting trained quickly.
I mean, we had the trees, you know, we had the desire, but without someone like Dan, it would not have happened.
This is where the sisters' olives end up, at Shabika's processing plant in Modesto.
When will these be olive oil?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Is that fast enough for you?
Wow.
That's not all that's fast. The olives right up a conveyor belt are dumped into a water bath, and the olive press is on. The water and oil are divided, and in a matter of minutes, the sisters have liquid gold, more than 1,000 bottles of olive oil that the sisters sell to raise money for the convent.
When we press those olives from Mission San Jose, I mean, the feeling here is just unbelievable. And every once in a while we get a little miracle thrown in.
But the sisters will tell you the real miracle is Dan Shabika, a man on a mission with a passion for preserving history.
That means by the weekend after Thanksgiving, we can really start harvesting.
Back at the mother house, the sisters keep their end of the bargain.
That'll be great.
Make good olive oil.
Absolutely.
Tending the trees and praying for a good crop. Each of the sisters even has their very own adopted olive tree.
It's doing really well, so I must have been doing something right.
So like we like to say, well, it's from blossom to bottle. And that's what this is, because there's nobody in between except God.
And some very dedicated women, praying this growing history will live on, celebrating their prized olive oil.
And this is?
That is a
voila.
That's it. That is the pressed
olive
filtered,
oil,
bottled, labeled, sealed, ready to go out the door.
To not have olive trees in heaven would be a shame.
Let's give you some olive knowledge. All olives start out green and then turn black or dark purple as they ripen. And olive trees have long lives. Olive trees have been known to live hundreds of years. If you're thinking of making your own olive oil, you'll need to press around 11 pounds of olives just to make 1 quart of olive oil.
Let's switch from crops to condiments for a moment. In addition to gluten-free and no trans fats, I'm sure that you're seeing lots of products touting sea salt these days. And as you might expect, getting that crop from the field to the table is a bit different from any harvest you've ever seen.
At first glance, it may look like snow-covered fields in a Midwestern winter. But this is late summer in Northern California, and these wide expanses of white are salt flats on the southern tip of the San Francisco Bay.
We trace the commercial operations back to about the 1850s, where there were salt works kind of all around the South Bay in particular, but even as far north as Napa. And through a number of acquisitions and the like over several years now, Cargill is the remaining salt manufacturer here.
The salt here comes from the waters of the Pacific Ocean. Flowing south through the bay, the salty water is captured in huge ponds just north of San Jose.
We typically bring in seawater just during the summer months. We don't want to bring it in during the winter time because there's so much rainwater coming off the hills that it actually dilutes the bay and makes it less salty.
The salty water is pumped into what are called concentrators, shallow ponds ringed by levees. Then, sun and wind evaporate much of the water, leaving behind a salty brine. As the increasingly salty water is mixed with brine from other concentrators, a pinkish hue becomes evident in the liquid.
And as it gets closer to salt precipitation, it takes on a very pink or reddish color. And that's because of a halophilic organism that lives in the brine, where nothing else can live at that high saline level. This can, and it happens to be pink. And when we drain it off and we wash it, then it turns back to white.
Pumped from pond to pond, the sea salt or solar salt brine will sit under sun and the wind for 3 to 5 years before it reaches the correct level of salinity.
So it starts at 3% and it gets greater and greater until it gets into the crystallizers, which is where we're standing right now. And at this point in the process, the brine is about 25% sodium chloride.
At the end of the evaporative process, you're left with a thick layer of sea salt in large ponds known as crystallizers. It looks like snow on a frozen lake. A crop ready to be harvested.
Each year we harvest 500,000 tons of salt. We harvest 4 to 6 inches in each crystallizer during the summer and during the fall. And we try to leave the remainder of the salt underneath as a mantle to have a good clean cut of salt so we're not digging into the bay muds at all.
After a grader breaks up the top layer, a harvester moves in to fill large trucks with tons of sea salt.
We do think of it as a crop. In fact, we talk about taking just the new crop from the crystallizer, which is about the top 4 or 5 inches. And we refer to it as this year's crop.
Cargill will run the sea salt through the first of several washes before stacking the harvest in huge piles some 80 feet high. All of this salt will ultimately be processed into various grades. Most will be used in different food products like granules for canning, a salt powder for butter, or crystals for ice cream.
As we look at the data, we find there have been about 6,000 new product introductions in the last 6 years that call out with sea salt or containing sea salt on the label or package in some way.
And there are other uses as well.
There are thousands and thousands, interestingly, of uses for salt, from setting dyes in textiles. It's used in the petroleum industry and many other uses, swimming pools, that kind of thing. But much of the salt from this facility does go to food use.
Consumer preference has prompted the growing number of products using sea salt. Some prefer the texture, some the taste.
A number of people do say that sea salt tastes different from other salt, even among different sea salts. You know, it's typically coarser, so people enjoy just the feel of it when they're cooking. Tastes different on the tongue, so it's not just the sense of taste that comes into play.
These salt flats are also important wildlife and wetland areas. The company has worked with a number of groups on recreational and environmental projects.
We found an opportunity to work with a number of agencies and return nearly 40,000 acres of marsh and wetland to public use and parks. There are all types of wildlife, so it's really neat to see as we go out there, from birds to harbor seals that congregate around some of the intake areas. And so again, you know, trying to return some of that if we're not using it, and I think was really the right thing to do, and such a beautiful area here to take advantage of.
There's no denying that this is a very different kind of harvest from others in the Heartland, but getting this crop to market demands the same kind of focus.
It's a very unique place to work, and everyone takes pride in what they do here in the solar plant especially. And it's just a great group to work with, and it's a fun time of the year during harvest when everyone prepares We've got a lot of people here and all the equipment is ready, and we usually perform really well, so we're proud of that.
That's going to do it for us. Thanks for traveling the country with us as we introduce you to such interesting people and places in America's heartland.
We know that we pass along a lot of information to you in every program, and in case you missed something or you just want to check out videos from this show or others, we make it easy. Just log on to our website at americasheartland.org, and of course there is lots going on our social media arena. You'll find us there as well. We'll see you next time right here on America's Heartland.
You can purchase a DVD or Blu-ray copy of this program. Here's the cost. To order, just visit us online or call 888-814-3923.
You can see it in the eyes of every woman and man in America's heartland, living close to the land. There's a love for the country and a pride in the brand in America's heartland, living close to the land.
America's Heartland is made possible by Farm Credit, financing agriculture and rural America since 1916. Farm Credit is cooperatively owned by America's farmers and ranchers. Learn more at farmcredit.com. Crop Life America, representing the companies whose modern farming innovations help America's farmers provide nutritious food for communities around the globe.
Want you to try tortillas made from beans? Want to dress your salad with olive oil that comes from a higher source? How about oil associated with divine intervention? And bringing in a harvest of sea salt headed for your dinner table. It's all coming up on America's Heartland.
You can see it in the eyes of every woman and man in America's heartland, living close to the land. There's a love for the country and a pride in the brand in America's heartland, living close to the land.
Has a very bright future.
Open sesame was the magical phrase unlocking the treasures of an ancient cave.
Yeah, this is a healthy looking sesame plant.
Today, opening a sesame pod unlocks a culinary treasure.
We're able to grow this here because it loves the hot weather, doesn't need much moisture, and so that really fits into where we are today.
Jimmy Kinder is a third-generation wheat farmer in Walters, Oklahoma. He'd been looking for a drought-resistant, economically viable crop to rotate with his winter wheat. Sesame fit the bill.
This is one of the unique things about this crop is that we're not looking for a market. We have a market for sesame. We just haven't been able to grow it efficiently until now.
That demand, along with new seed varieties and new technology, provided
America's Heartland is made possible by Farm Credit, financing agriculture and rural America since 1916. Farm Credit is cooperatively owned by America's farmers and ranchers. Learn more at farmcredit.com. Crop Life America, representing the companies whose modern farming innovations help America's farmers provide nutritious food for communities around the globe.
Hi, I'm Rob Stewart. Looking for something different on your dinner table? Well, stick around because we'll take you cross-country to meet some farmers bringing in unusual crops. Small and crunchy, sesame seeds have been a valuable crop for thousands of years. You've had them in candy and on hamburger buns. But one farmer in Oklahoma is changing the way the crop gets to consumers. Forget about corn or wheat tortillas. Researchers in North Dakota...
crop opportunity for farmers. And there's another benefit.
The harvesting equipment is the same as with wheat, as with corn, that's the neat thing about sesame. There's no specialized piece of equipment needed.
So why hasn't the crop been more widely grown? Well, another word on open sesame. The pods open when ripe and spill their seeds onto the ground. The challenge has been to develop a pod that holds the seeds until the entire field is ready for a machine harvest. New plant varieties have made that possible.
And so the variety that we have actually stays closed until we can come in and get a harvester to actually roll the pod open and release the seed.
What you're looking at is a unique sesame pod that exists nowhere else in the world. Non-dehiscent sesame, which means non-shattering sesame.
We brought you lots of stories about the farm and ranch families who deliver the food, fuel, and fiber so important to consumers in the U.S. and around the world. And the numbers are impressive when you total them up. American farmers lead the world in corn production and have a lion's share in raising soybeans used in hundreds of products. U.S. wheat goes to markets around the globe. American rice producers deliver the white grains to markets in Asia, as well as its growing popularity in the U.S. And let's not forget other crops like cotton, oats, and sorghum, even maple syrup. So, overseas markets are important. Consumers just like you are ready to try new foods, and researchers are finding new uses for old favorites. And what about those specialty crops? Well, let's start in Oklahoma, where Akiba Howard says a very ancient grain